She was the silent one, the washed-up sergeant no one spoke to at Fort Banner, buried in the shadows of a sun-bleached warehouse. Soldiers mocked her, laughed at her stillness, never knowing what lay beneath her rolled-up sleeve. Then one day, a tattoo slipped into view. Black, geometric, not art, but a mark earned in blood. A 4-star general stopped mid-step, his face went pale. That symbol wasn't a decoration. It was the seal of a mission so classified its survivors were listed as dead. What happened next rewrote everything they thought they knew about her. If stories like this move you, hit subscribe. You won't want to miss the next one. Fort Banner wasn't built for comfort. It was baked into the Nevada desert like an afterthought, wind-scorched and sun-bleached, surrounded by a horizon that never blinked. Sand chewed at boots and tempers alike, the kind of place where the days dragged, the nights bit cold, and stories turned into truths just by being repeated often enough. Sergeant Elise Marin kept to the edges. You saw her, if you looked, hunched over a crate in the supply bay, running her hands down the rows of gear with mechanical precision. But most didn't look. She moved without noise, her footsteps quiet even on corrugated steel, her breath slow and measured like someone trained to take up as little space as possible. The base called her the Ghost. Not in admiration, just an easy joke. The kind that sticks. They said she'd frozen during an op in Kosovo. Some whispered it was friendly fire. Others claimed she lost her nerve and got half her team clipped in an ambush. She never denied it, never corrected anyone. Silence makes a better coffin than most lies. What people missed, because they weren't trained to see it, were the details. The way she always sat with her back to a wall, how her eyes never stopped moving, flicking from exit signs to shadow lines to the timing of door hinges. She didn't flinch at sudden noises, but you could see her calculating trajectory, range, cover. Muscle memory built far from filing cabinets. She logged inventory like lives depended on it. Maybe once they had. No mistakes, no shortcuts, no loose tags or mislabeled gear. Every case was prepped like it was headed to war. Most assumed she did it because she had nothing left to prove. The truth was harder. She did it because everything else had been taken. Nobody remembered when she arrived, just that she'd come quietly with a sealed transfer and no welcome. By week 2, she'd become part of the architecture, something to maneuver around, not speak to. But sometimes, when the warehouse door clanged open too fast or a chopper flew too low overhead, Elise would stop cold and glance skyward, one hand drifting unconsciously to her left shoulder. Just a flicker. Just long enough to betray the ghost as someone who hadn't always lived in shadows. The inspection was unplanned, the kind meant to rattle routines and measure reactions. Officers barked orders down the sun-baked corridor while troops scrambled into lines, tugging at uniforms, squaring off gear. Elise Marin was in the far corner of Bay 6, aligning cases of thermal optics with her usual eerie precision when the call came through. All personnel to formation, now. She didn't rush. She never did. Just secured the last latch, wiped her palms on her fatigues, and fell in behind a row of junior logistics techs who barely noticed her presence. Halfway through the inspection, as a superior moved down the line checking straps and belts, Elise reached up to adjust a shoulder rig that had slipped out of alignment. Her sleeve rode high with emotion. No fanfare, no drama, just a flicker of black ink. Specialist Rowan caught it first. He leaned, curious, then froze, staring. "What the hell is that?" he whispered. Coiled around the curve of her upper arm was a tattoo. Sharp angles, interlocking lines, dense geometry that looked more machine logic than human expression. No names, no unit tags, no patriotic eagles. Just math and symmetry wrapped around something almost avian in silhouette. A phoenix, maybe. But not quite. Rowan fumbled his phone from a side pocket, tilted it low, and snapped a quick photo before Elise pulled her sleeve back down. She didn't say a word, didn't even glance in his direction. But her hand lingered on the fabric just a second longer than it needed to. The image was on group chats within 20 minutes, bouncing between barracks like wildfire. Captions ranged from lazy to cruel. Mark of the dropout. Black Ops Barbie. Tactical tramp stamp. People laugh the way they do when they think they've caught something weak pretending to be strong. But not everyone laughed. Lieutenant Jonah Reese scrolled past the image while eating cold chow in the admin tent. His thumb paused mid-swipe. The emblem stirred something in his brain. Not a memory exactly, but a residue. He'd seen a variant of that mark once before, in a place that didn't allow phones. A black dossier with half-redacted mission reports and an access code that took 6 approvals just to open. His fork hovered in the air. His appetite vanished. He didn't know what the symbol meant. Not yet. But he knew one thing with certainty. No one walking around with that tattoo had earned it by mistake. Lieutenant Jonah Reese didn't sleep that night. Not because of the jokes or the photo or even the sudden unease tightening his gut. It was the shape, the emblem, burned into his thoughts like it had waited years for someone to notice. Something about its geometry carried the weight of things meant to be forgotten. He started at his desk, late in the comms annex, where nobody checked logs after 2200. He keyed into old mission databases, bypassed front-end systems, and tunneled through archival logs tagged training-related but riddled with red flags. One set of entries caught his eye. Operations marked inactive, but carrying encryption signatures well beyond standard theater missions. Ghost files. Retired, but not dead. He wasn't cleared for most of them. But he knew how to read between lines, how to follow the spaces where data used to be. Cross-reference enough tags, and you begin to see outlines. The absence forming its own story. That's when he found it. Dagger Psalm. No summary, no debrief, just a mission name, a timestamp, and an access tier so high it required sign-off from both Joint Command and Strategic Intelligence to even see the title page. Tier 6. The kind of classification used for missions they didn't just bury, they erased. He leaned back slowly, eyes unfocused, staring past the glow of his screen. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was the first echo he'd found. That same emblem, etched into one old requisition report, a corner of it, at least, tucked into a logistics request from 6 years ago, attached to a shipment of gear that was lost in transit, bound for a region that didn't officially exist. He enlarged the symbol, overlaid it with the photo from the group chat, and the match was unmistakable. Not art, not a mistake. A mark, deliberate, specific, earned, and Sergeant Elise Marin wore it like it was just another scar. Reese stared at the photo again, then at her personnel file. It didn't match. The version stored in Fort Banner's system was bland, generic, oddly clean for someone allegedly washed out of multiple deployments. No citations, no flags, just an unexplained transfer from an unnamed forward command. Scrubbed. But buried inside the admin folder, behind an incorrectly labeled attachment, he found a second file. Locked. Requiring emergency override credentials to even view the metadata. The file shouldn't have been there. No one with her record should be assigned to inventory unless someone, somewhere, wanted her forgotten. And that's when it hit him. They hadn't buried Elise Marin because she failed. They buried her because she didn't. Fort Banner wasn't ready. The notice came at 0500, terse, unsigned, and impossible to misread. General A.R. Ayres arriving 0700 field review, no ceremony. No one expected him for another 8 weeks. Maybe not at all. 4-star generals didn't wander out to Banner unless something was wrong. The kind of wrong that couldn't be massaged with memos or shuffled under performance charts. The kind of wrong that made careers bleed out quietly behind closed doors. By 0600, the base was an anthill kicked sideways. Officers threw on crisp uniforms, barked rehearsed discipline. Mess hall scrubbed, flags starched, inventories double-counted. Marin, meanwhile, was nowhere near the parade square. She was in Bay 9, alone, cinching down a field case so precisely it looked surgical. Her hair was tied back tight, sleeves pushed up against the heat, dust streaking the edges of her collar. One hand gripped a strap, the other tested the lock with practiced force. Movements clean, mechanical, exact. She didn't hear the footsteps. General Ayres didn't announce himself. He never did. He believed observation worked better before people had the chance to perform. So he walked, unaccompanied, through the bones of Fort Banner. The motor pool, the munitions trailers, the faded walls of command outposts. Looking. Listening. Years in covert strategy had taught him the truth was rarely in the reports. It lived in the shadows between protocol and real life. He was passing the warehouse when he saw her. Just a soldier, bent over a crate. Nothing special, except there was something wrong with the way she moved, or rather too right. Not the gait of logistics, not the posture of punishment. There was a gravity to her, coiled restraint, like someone who knew where the danger would come from, even in silence. Then the light above flickered, and the edge of a tattoo caught the glare. Black, geometric, precise. He stopped breathing. It wasn't just familiar, it was unforgettable. Ayres had seen that emblem once, and only once, in a subterranean briefing room so classified it didn't have a floor number. 10 men in suits, no names. Mission briefing stamped with a warning burned into the top. Terminal, need to bury. Dagger. Psalm. Operation lost. Survivors listed as KIA. Sealed by presidential directive. No paper trail, no confirmation, just an emblem. And now, impossibly, it was on the arm of a sergeant tightening a cargo strap on a crate of surplus NVGs. His voice broke the room like a trigger pull. "Where did you get that mark?" The words landed like a thunderclap. Elise didn't flinch, but her spine locked into place like something ancient had just snapped awake inside her. Her eyes rose, steady and unblinking, as if she'd been waiting for someone to ask that exact question for years. The warehouse buzzed with overhead lights and the distant groan of a lift motor, but inside that moment, everything stopped. "Operation Dagger Psalm," she said, each syllable flat, clipped, surgically clean, 1 in 9 out, asset secured. The warehouse went dead quiet. General Ayres stood like stone, eyes boring into her. Not suspicion anymore, not even surprise. Recognition, yes, but also a weight that sat on his shoulders like a memory trying to resurface. He didn't move for a second. Then he turned, slow and sharp. "You," he said to the nearest junior officer who had frozen halfway into the bay with the clipboard still in his hand. "Out, all of you, now." There was no argument, even without raised volume. The tone carried the force of battlefield command. The room emptied like a breach had opened. Boots scrambled, clipboard dropped, metal doors hissed shut. Only Lieutenant Reese remained, half hidden behind a stacked crate of comms gear, trying not to breathe too loudly. Ayres didn't see him yet, and Reese wasn't ready to make himself known. He had questions. Too many. But now he had something else. Confirmation. The general walked slowly toward Elise, his boots echoing off the concrete floor. "Who authorized your reassignment?" "I was told not to ask questions," she replied. His jaw tensed, then relaxed into something unreadable. Not soft, not angry, just old. "I want her full file," he said, turning toward the open air, though there was no one left to hear it. Not the training jacket, the red sealed one. That was when Reese's heart started hammering. Red-sealed files weren't supposed to be anywhere near Fort Banner. They belonged in temperature-controlled vaults under Washington or Langley, wrapped in 6 layers of clearance and lies. Even knowing about them was enough to raise eyebrows. Accessing one, career ending without the right name stamped above yours. And yet, somehow, hers was here. On base, on standby, like it had been waiting to be unsealed. Reese ducked low, backing away from the crate without a sound. His mind raced, not with fear, but with something harder to carry, certainty. They hadn't just buried her. They'd hidden her somewhere no one would ever think to look. In plain sight, beneath the uniform of someone nobody cared to understand. The file was thicker than it should have been. Red-sealed, black-stamped, edges worn like it had been handled more than red. Ayers sat alone in the secure briefing room they'd cleared for him. Just a table, a lamp, and walls designed to keep noise in and curiosity out. He opened the file without ceremony. It began clinical. Operation name: Dagger Psalm. Objective: high-value extraction of Dr. Rafiq Al-Khatib, nuclear physicist abducted by a rogue paramilitary network. Target location: Eastern Range, a stitched-together war zone outside jurisdiction and beyond rescue. The team: 9 operators, cross-branch composite, trained for environments that left bodies and no records. Leader: Sergeant First Class Elise Marin. The tone shifted at the halfway mark. Insertion: undetected. Objective located within a fortified civilian complex. Extraction initiated at 0300 under heavy cloud cover. Then, failure. Communications severed. Forward reconnaissance misread. A leak, later determined. Betrayed before boots even left the shadows. 12 minutes into exfil, the first shot. Then 6 more bodies. Fast, surgical. Elise dragged the target through chaos, through fire and broken concrete and blood that wasn't his. Gunship support denied. Risk of international incident too high. No air cover, no backup. Still, she moved. 12 miles, 2 days, wounded. Debrief footage, voice transcription only. I told him if he stopped moving, we'd both die. She didn't lose him. She didn't lose herself. Final pickup at Point Echo. Civilian target delivered, intact. Marin covered the extraction site until fuel ran out and the last drone went dark. She crossed the final ridge into friendly territory on foot, wrapped in blood-soaked fatigues and silence. Her commendation: redacted. Her testimony: classified. Her rank: reassigned. The reasoning: a diplomatic freeze negotiated in the back rooms of global policy, where victories are sometimes worth less than secrets. Her disgrace wasn't personal, it was structural. Ayers closed the file. His hand trembled, not with rage, but recognition. This wasn't a mistake. This was the machine doing what it always did, eating truth to protect optics. She didn't fail. She succeeded too loudly. The announcement hit just before sunrise. Formation at 0600. Full base. No explanation. It took seconds for word to spread, and only minutes more for speculation to run wild. Surprise assemblies weren't standard. Not for Fort Banner, and never at dawn unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. Rumors cracked through the barracks like dry twigs. Inspection, reassignment, Shutdown. No one knew. Everyone showed. The desert air bit sharp as the ranks assembled on the cracked tarmac, boots clicking into place, breaths misting in the cold. Officers lined up in full dress. Staff sergeants double-checked rows. Tension sharpened the silence. Then General Ayres stepped forward. No fanfare. No salute. Just a file in his hand and a storm building behind his eyes. He didn't begin with pleasantries. No acknowledgments. No opening statements. His voice was low, calm, and sharp enough to slice the air in half. This base misjudged one of its own. No one moved. No one breathed. "Sergeant Elise Marin," he said, holding up the red-sealed file like a verdict, "did not wash out. She was not demoted for failure. She led an operation buried so deep in the archives it took presidential clearance to read. She extracted a high-value asset across 12 miles of hostile terrain, alone, after 8 of her team were gunned down. And she succeeded. But because her success threatened a fragile diplomatic balance, it was erased." A murmur started, then died under the weight of his pause. You called her a ghost. You made her a punchline. You treated silence as shame. Across the ranks, heads began to drop. Some tried to steal glances at Marin, standing at the edge of the formation, sleeves rolled, boots dusty. Still, silent, watching. The tattoo, once mocked in hushed voices and private chats, now shimmered in the early light like something sacred. What once marked her as damaged now screamed survival. Proof of the kind of courage the rest of them only trained for. Ayres looked across the sea of uniforms. Every officer who ignored her, every soldier who chose laughter over questions, you owe her more than silence now. Nobody responded, because there were no words that could match the weight of what had been ignored. It started with a single clip, blurry, grainy, shot from a phone low to the ground, half hidden behind a stack of supply crates. Elise, standing in the supply bay, covered in spilled grease. Laughter echoing off metal walls. Voices snickering from behind the camera. One soldier mimicking her walk, another mocking her silence. Someone else tossing a rag in her direction like throwing scraps to a stray. She didn't speak, just wiped her hands on her fatigues, eyes blank, the tattoo on her arm catching the light as she turned back to her work. The video hit a niche forum first. Someone posted it as a joke. By morning, it wasn't funny anymore. By noon, it was everywhere. Veteran advocacy pages, military watchdog accounts, civilian allies, quiet outrage building momentum like a snowball rolled through fire. The image of a decorated operator being humiliated in silence cracked open something deeper than policy. It struck the culture, cut past rank and structure, into the bones. And it spread fast. Screenshots of her sealed file leaked next, heavily redacted, but enough to match the emblem, enough to connect the dots. Dagger Psalm, the mission that didn't officially exist. Survivors listed as KIA. The public didn't need full confirmation to recognize injustice. They just needed to see her face under fluorescent warehouse lights, standing still while others tore her dignity apart. Statements followed. Advocacy groups demanded review. Congressmen asked questions they didn't want the answers to. Veterans posted their own stories, different branches, different years, same silence, same scars. The military scrambled to draft responses that wouldn't make it worse. Elise declined every request. No interviews, no cameras, no stage. She issued a single typed statement, forwarded through official channels unsigned. I didn't survive to be seen. I survived so someone else could come home. That was all, but it was enough. The clip that was supposed to humiliate her instead redefined her, not as a victim, as proof of how wrong a system could be, and how much strength it took not to scream. Clearance took time, even for a 4-star general. Ayers didn't care. He burned through obstacles like they were paper in a furnace, one signed order at a time. Every denial triggered a higher escalation. Every locked door opened, slow and reluctant, to a man who knew where the real files lived and which names had been erased to protect clean headlines. He called it Project Dagger Echo, not a PR campaign, not a panel, a task force, handpicked, silent, mandated to track down the ghosts, soldiers buried by Black Ops bureaucracy, whose missions never made it to ribbons, whose records were altered, redacted, or wiped completely. They weren't broken. They were lost. And Ayers was going to find them. Elise Marin was offered reassignment immediately. Special Operations Command, advisory, quiet clearances, and more than a few apologies wrapped in starched uniforms. She refused them all. "I don't need a second chance at what I already did right," she said. "I need to be useful." Instead, she asked for something no one expected: transfer to a new pilot program under the Defense Health Directorate, Silent Shield, a support branch built for clandestine operatives re-entering civilian life. No uniforms, no protocols, just a door, a name, and someone who understood what classified silence felt like. Ayers didn't argue. He approved the transfer the same day. Word spread fast through channels that didn't use newsletters or official memos, just encrypted texts, challenge coins passed hand to hand, a nod from someone who knew. Operators from ghost teams started stepping forward, some still on active duty, others long since faded into contractor limbo. All of them had a story. All of them had the same look in their eyes, unspoken, unfinished. It was Reese, quiet, meticulous Reese, who proposed it first. The tattoo, the emblem, not as a branding, but as a mark of recognition, a signal not of who you were, but of what you carried. And so, it became the unofficial seal of the task force. A phoenix made of angles, geometry, and grit. No ceremony, no citation, just ink and survival, not to prove anything, but to remind the world that not all scars are meant to fade. The mountains outside Taos didn't ask questions. They just stood, old, still, unflinching, a good place for the broken to go unnoticed while they stitched themselves back together. Elise never named the place. It had no official charter, no directory listing, no pamphlets, no tours. Just a gravel drive that disappeared into cedar and a one-story building with worn siding, quiet lights, and beds that didn't creak. No uniforms were allowed past the porch. No ranks either. Just people. People who had spent years doing things no one could admit happened, in places that didn't officially exist for causes that would never be written into textbooks. They arrived without notice, often in the middle of the night. Sometimes with duffel bags, sometimes with nothing. Always with eyes that scanned too fast and bodies that tensed too hard at the wrong kinds of silence. They never called ahead. Didn't need to. They found it the same way she had, through whispers, favors owed, strings pulled in the dark. Some stayed for a few days, others weeks. A few never left, choosing instead to mend what couldn't be surgically fixed by keeping watch for the next lost one. Elise lived among them, not above them. She cleaned floors, cooked simple meals, walked the property perimeter at night like it was muscle memory. No security system, just presence, just vigilance. Her tattoo stayed visible now, a choice, a quiet flag. One afternoon, just as snow started to ghost across the porch, A young woman stepped through the doorway, lean, sharp-eyed, too still, her jaw tight with restraint. Army Ranger tab on her duffel, barely visible. Her hands shook when she spoke. "I read about what they did to you," she said, voice fraying at the edges. "How you made it through with everyone thinking you were something else. I thought I was the only one." Elise didn't answer right away. Just rolled up her sleeve and let the light catch the black ink. "You're not," she said softly. "Tell me what they made you forget." Outside, a flag moved in the wind, not colored, not branded, just lines and angles. A phoenix rising. Quiet, geometric, unspoken.